In terms of what we want to accomplish today, a few things at the beginning. Obviously, the note well. We are into the second day, so hopefully we understand all of these things, but I'll leave it there for just a second to review. Separately, the note really well. The IETF codes of conduct as we come through, please be respectful and courteous as we get through some of our technical discussions today and always. If this is your first meeting of IETF, please, if you are here in person in the room, make sure that you are logged into the on-site tool. If you come to the mic, please make sure that you've also registered that you've come to the mic in the tool. And if you are joining us remotely, please be careful to make sure that your audio is muted and also your video is off, as that helps preserve bandwidth. Additional resources to include our agenda, how to use the online tool, the on-site tool, the Meet Echo tool. And then we will need, the more note takers we have, the better. But if we could just get at least one person to commit to making sure that we have baseline minutes. Yes, thank you. A review of our milestones. We have the use cases document, which has now been published as RFC. So congratulations to everyone who worked so hard on that. We will be discussing, we will be discussing some of our other requirements, data model, and applicability statement documents, and we are trying to get those moved through. We are beyond October of 2024 because it is now November 5th of 2024, and hopefully we'll have some updates on how we are going towards working group last call. Generally, as we look at the amount of work we have left, again, we have 9657, we have adopted scheduling document and the requirements document. We will be seeing also a presentation on the applicability document and presumably at some point having adoption calls for that. But there is also, and additionally, the presentation on Alto. And then additionally, there is some other work that is being carried as personal draft. While we may not have time in this hour to go through all of the additional personal draft work, it is something that I want the working group to be aware of, that these other documents exist, and that as we get through our initial set of adopted work, that we should be thinking through what might be additional coming next. Otherwise, here's our agenda. We're going to start with applicability. Let me just take a moment and ask if anybody would like to agenda bash. Is there anything in here we think should be added? We will have 10 minutes of open mic at the end, we believe. All right, well, if there's nothing else to talk through, let's begin. Our first presentation is going to be on the TVR applicability document with Li Zhang. All right. And then give me just a moment to get your slides up. And just let me know when to progress.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very honored to be the first session to introduce TVR applicability, and on behalf of the list of authors and contributors. Next. Okay, this according to the TVR working group charter, and the working group will work on the requirements and use cases, information and data model, and applicability draft, and this is why we propose this work in this working group. So, and this draft will address how to use the information and the data model, and also other auxiliary IETF technologies to solve the requirements and use cases. Next. Okay, and in this document, we identified and worked through using a concentrated use case, which is called tidal network. And we also document the applicability of TVR models, and also discuss the synchronization and protocol applicability. And finally, we also provide some operational considerations. Okay, next page. Yes, as we know, in a tidal network, the traffic usually has a ambiguous tidal period, including a heavy traffic period and a light traffic period. And the time duration of the highway traffic period and light traffic are clearly identified, and the switching time between the highway traffic period and the light traffic period can be well established. And we will talk applicability based on this case. And there is also a question for the working group. Is it sufficient to consider all-in-one use case in the applicability draft? Okay, next page.
Well, actually, let's take that as for a moment here. When we think through a TVR applicability document, separate, of course, from the use case document that we have already as RFC, let's talk for a moment about this question. You know, is it enough to talk only about tidal network use cases in this document? Do we have any opinions on that?
Rick Taylor. A single use case in a document on its own, surely this is the applicability to tidal networks document. If I'm going to be really critical, and I don't like criticizing hard work by people, yeah, I'm unsure whether this is a general applicability document if it only really dives into one use case.
Dan King. No, I think we need at least a couple of use cases. The nice example that we have here is a soluble problem. It's easy to understand. Will it be the killer app for TVR? No. Is it something to kind of get things moving and start thinking about how we would use the various Yang models? Does it force us to think about how we're going to communicate the Yang models? Yes. And I think that's the point. It's a 0.0 version of the document. We needed at least something to start with, you know, as an anchor point. I do think that we need to consider that there were sort of three categories of the applicability of TVR. This is just the sort of energy efficiency. I think what the working group can help us do is identify what the next use case, which is likely to be more complicated.
Agreed.
This is Luis Contreras from Telefonica. I think also that it could be probably good to have different use cases as long as these use cases exercise differently the framework that is being presented as so different angles to see different perspectives and different usages of the TVR models and also the architecture.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Tony, we're in the queue.
Sorry, Rick Taylor, I'm jumping back again to carry on the earlier comment about this is a great starting point. I completely agree. There is a danger of a working group publishing a document entitled the Working Group Applicability Document because it paints you into a corner. It forces external observers to say, oh, that's what TVR means, just tidal networks. And I think you need to be, it may just be a name thing, but I think you need to be really careful about saying this is the TVR applicability.
So to agree with that, then is the question not whether we should have a single TVR applicability document, but to something you had mentioned, if the use cases call out three different large use cases, does that then imply that we might have different applicability documents saying for those looking at, for example, energy efficiency, here's the applicability and how you would apply it into various networks. And for other cases, there would be other applicability documents and that would help us scope this one. That's a very long-winded question, and I'm not sure how exactly we answer it, but in the interest of time, no pun intended, in the interest of time, what we might say is, let's consider that and we will post to the mailing list that exact question as to how we would choose to scope this. And when you see that mail come through, please participate in that discussion.
Okay, yes, okay. And the next page. In the following 3 pages, I will discuss the applicability of TVR model in tidal network. And the first question is in which scenarios the TVR data model is applicable. As defined in TVR requirements draft, there are the stack can be generated executed in both in centralized manner or distributed manner. So I list all the possible combinations here, and the result is that only when the schedule is centralized generation and distributed execution, or centralized generation and centralized execution, but they are not on the same device, then the TVR model is applicable. So next page. Okay, and based on the two scenarios in the previous page, we analyze the interactions between different devices. In the first scenario, we just call it a distributed model. It includes a managing device which is responsible for generation and generation schedules, and also needed to deliver the data models to the managed devices, and the managed device just need to execute the schedules. And for the second scenario, we call it a centralized model. In the centralized model, there is also a managing device which do the similar work, and we also have a network controller which is responsible for the routing calculus, and also a network device which executes the routing result and schedules. Okay, next page.
We do have an entry in the queue. Would you like to take questions now or at the end?
I think
If we do
no.
go a few minutes late, that's okay.
that's okay.
Please.
Please.
Oh, go ahead. Yes.
This is Yingzhen. So my question is, in the young model, we do have a device model and a service model. So maybe you want to distinguish that in your, especially in your distributed mode or your centralized mode, which one is applicable?
Yes. Maybe I need to note it here in the figure. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and the last page is talk about which YAM models are applicable in this scenario, and as TVR YAM model defines three YAM models. They are TVR schedule and TVR topology and TVR node. All of them are applicable in tidal network, and they are used to control network attributes, and also also can be used to deliver topology informations. And also the right figure provides just an example for the using the TVR node YAM model to control the node interface to shut down from 90 clock to 7 clock variety. And the next page. Okay, I need to speed up. Okay, this page shows the consideration for the management protocols, and in the summary, we consider the RESTconf and NetConf. The NetConf is better for large scale and critical schedule, operational requirements scenarios, and the RESTconf will better for smaller scale and isolated scheduling tasks, and also will be better for the service and network architectures. Next page. And this is the time synchronization considerations. We have listed the hardware-based protocols and the software protocols. Hardware-based protocols will have higher precision and stability, but requires dedicated network, dedicated devices, and also much expensive. And for the software protocols, it's not very precision, but it's not required. A dedicated network is suitable for the most of the TVR use cases. And the next page, please. And for the tidal network case, it does not require two precision time synchronization level. So a second level is enough. So the software-based protocols is enough for the deployment. So we analyze the NTP and SNTP for the applicability, and we find that both of them are applicable in this case. The next page. Okay, here database schedule database is also essential in the deployment. We define the 4 type of schedule entries and provide some database requirements. And yeah, next page. Okay. And here we provide sample operational considerations. It needs to coordinate network events, and also TVR need to accurate scheduling of paths, and also it requires the timestamped date models, and also the schedule is execution considerations. This is because for the link coming up or link deletion is needed to be considered differently. And okay, next page. And for the next steps, and we would like welcome for the other use cases, and also the contributions to the operation and security considerations. And we will also want to develop a TVR use case demo hackathon, and based on this draft, and also looking for the partners for this hackathon. And in the last, I want to ask, is this document a good start for the applicability item? If so, maybe we can request adoption in this working group. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Dan King. So I wanted to highlight as a contributor to the document that on some of the previous slides, there are options being discussed. And I know that sort of in an internet draft, we don't really want options, especially in terms of applicability. It's a cookbook of how I'm going to use the tools to kind of solve one very specific TVR use case. So what would be really useful for anyone looking at the document is to remember that we want to show kind of the instantiation of this TVR work and how it can be used. So if you have a preference of one technique over another, now is the time to kind of help us. And as Lee's pointed out, the intention is to have a hackathon. It's a relatively straightforward project. We'll use sort of an NS3, GNS3 type approach, simulate the network, use the Yang models, run a messaging protocol, ideally an IETF one, show which parts of the Yang model you would need to apply in order to sort of effectively meet the use case and provide the solution. So anyone who's got an opinion, wants to help us develop this, wants to be one of the partners at the hackathon, would be very welcome.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And also agreed. And also that would be a great thing to put to the mailing list, which is please join us for the hackathon if we can arrange one next time. Right, in the interest of time, then we will move on. But what I will say is regarding the call for adoption, what I would like to do is have the discussion on the mailing list about the scoping of the applicability documents first, so then we would understand the scope of what we would be calling to adopt. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, next on the agenda are going to be TVR requirements with Dan. And others?
Yeah, basically everyone in the room. Next slide, please. So essentially, this is our requirements document. In fact, I think I can capture most of the discussion that we've had in the document very succinctly to say that we are reflecting what it is that TVR would like to provide. We weren't defining the protocol solution or the Yang model. What we wanted to do with our ID is essentially say, in a TVR environment, what is it in terms of the major functions that we're trying to provide? Next slide. And these are listed, maybe next slide. No, okay, so essentially these are sort of several categories of function for providing a time variant network capability The routing is kind of a misnomer because we don't affect the routing protocol, but essentially we expect link changes. These are planned link changes. And there are specific objectives and entities and terminology that are going to be required. The constraints that you see here are what we've added since the 0.3 version. So we expect from a requirements perspective that there will be planned changes reflected based on the tidal example there, so a traffic demand matrix or some historic monitoring of user activity that will be fed into some entity, and then a schedule will be generated. There will be a set of objective functions for minimizing or efficiently utilizing a particular resource in the network. In this case, it's energy. And again, that's kind of reflected in a tidal example where you might have IoT devices or very simple wireless LAN devices that essentially can be powered down or put into a sort of soft state mode and minimize the amount of power that they're consuming based on expected user behavior when they arrive at campus or a railway station or an airport, etc. There may be some predicted weather that's rapidly approaching the east coast of a particular continent, where we may want to start shutting down equipment in advance because there may be some sort of impact and limited amount of energy that could be available. And that obviously is a finite resource that might need to be maximized post the weather event. And then one of the examples that Lewis brought up was sort of scheduled OAM activity, maybe link maintenance. Those are sort of, again, sort of planned, expected events where we might want to apply TVR. The major contribution, I guess, in the most recent version is on the security side of things. So this isn't a set of text that describes how to negate or mitigate attacks on a TVR network. It's really about the sort of things that you need to be thinking about. And actually, this was a comment that Ed made, I think, at the last IETF, which is, well, great, you're talking about the function that's required for TVR network, some of the constraints, objectives, entities, etc. But what are the security concerns that we might have? I guess the applicability document starts to address some of the considerations that have been described in the requirements document. So that's where we might look at the threat vector, attack vector for a TVR network. And it's wholly dependent or highly dependent on the type of technology that you're using as well. So some protocols might be more secure than others, whether they're sort of TCP or UDP or stateful or stateless, but that also introduces a bunch of other sort of security considerations. But at least we've tried to document, thanks to Lee actually for providing the majority of this text, what we need to be aware of. And again, the requirements is not solution discussion at this point. Next slide.
Do you have just a
Sure.
couple quick questions on that, if I may? Here we say security requirements. In the document, we say security considerations. But just to clarify, since this is a requirements document, are these security considerations for those implementing to these requirements, or do we feel that we might also levy security requirements?
I don't know. I think the reason that they're called security considerations from a sort of section perspective is because that was the template.
Yeah.
Yeah. They are requirements, so maybe we just need to make that clear.
Yes, and maybe even
Yeah.
separate, here's a section of the security requirements, and here are the considerations that perhaps have driven why these are the requirements.
Yeah,
Something.
and I think in the applicability document it says considerations as well. Maybe that's more
Yeah.
accurate. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. What I would maybe ask is for people to kind of specifically look at the security requirements and see if there's anything obvious that's been missed. I mean, clearly, we need to be aware as sort of individuals in the IETF. We often get very excited about the shiny protocols or data models that we're working on, and when it comes to operational and security considerations, it's usually sort of the last thing that we do, you know, the last section of the document that we write. So maybe we could be a bit more proactive on some of the applicability work. But there's no point in writing how to mitigate or negate if we don't fully recognize what those requirements might be. Cool. Next. Yep.
Rick is in the queue.
Rick.
Sorry, I'll take the question at the end if you want.
No, you've
Okay,
you've got it.
I'm here now.
Yeah, yeah.
I was just looking at the constraint factors. I'm interested that you don't have motion as a constraint factor. You call out weather conditions for satellite communications. That's that.
Like Earth
Your-
motion.
No, motion of the platform. So
okay.
I'm thinking further out from Leo.
Yeah.
You know, let's say
UAV type.
moon.
Yeah.
You know, literally your satellite is now obscured by a
So like occlusion.
occlusion. Yeah. So given you're following an orbit, that's fairly predictable. You can do a time variant graph of that sort of thing. Surely that would be a constraint factor that would influence the requirements of TVR. It was a question I was interested, and equally you could do something where you say trains which stop at stations can offload engineering data or something, or planes is the same thing.
Right.
That would be a scheduled arrival of the thing, hence a link could appear.
Yeah.
Purely on motion, not on disruption of the environment.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, line of sight is a consideration. One of the use cases
Yeah.
that we were looking at was basically you have to point a microwave or some
Yeah.
free space optics at a point in space at particular times of day or day of week.
But the schedule could include there's no point trying to point it west because the thing you're pointing it to is not going to be there until 12 a.m.
Yeah.
It just seemed like an omission. I wondered whether you'd covered it.
Yeah.
anywhere
So
else.
this is, I will have to double check what we have. So these aren't, this isn't a new section. This is an expansion of an existing section, but I'll see if anything covers occlusion. And if not, we'll make sure we capture that as
Happy
well.
to take it to the list. It's cool.
Thank you, sir.
So just myself, one other question on this, and that is quickly and informally, how many folks here or to chime in online have looked at and read the -04? Okay, so a few. Another is as we come to understand any remaining work for this document, please give it a look, and if you have other suggestions, please take it to the mailing list.
Lovely. Next slide, please. Clearly not. Thanks, Rick. But considering only 4 people have read the document, or at least the latest version of the document, yeah, we would welcome additional reviews, editorial, because when hopefully we get to a point where we last call the document, having 15 people read the document at that point, it will be, you know, sort of a double-edged sword. So yes, it's nice, but gosh, why didn't you review it earlier? So if we could get a couple of quality reviews from a technical perspective, but also editorial, it would be greatly appreciated. And that just makes our life easier once we do get to a point where we can kind of last call. And I know we're slightly late. At this point, we're a week late.
So that's not so bad.
Oh, it's not so bad. Yeah. What am I complaining about?
No, absolutely. Thank you so much. And that would be the request again. Also, my request to have an introduction section.
Great. Yes. Okay. I will take it. I will listen this time and actually action it. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you so much. All right. Next on the agenda, we will have alto exposure.
Thank you. So hello everyone, this is Luis from Telefonica. I will cover the draft on the alto exposure. So I did something here. Okay, next please. So yeah, basically here in the draft, we essentially present an off-path mechanism for scheduling, for exposing the schedule changes. So on your left, you can see a scenario that we choose for basically for showcasing the case, but it's not important so much the scenario, but the idea of having this off-path mechanism. So the advantage of this is that somehow we can offload the processing of the changes to a component, so it's not part of the network elements. But in any case, this can coexist as well with a on-path solution. So in fact, the component, in this case, the alto server, could be fed with the on-path distribution of the changes. So this is totally independent. So the idea of this approach is basically to define a solution for exposing topological changes and maybe associated metrics, performance, and so to applications and services. These applications and services could be both internal and external. So it could be, for instance, the mobile packet core internal to an operator, or even external, whatever content distribution networks, CDN, or content provider or gaming provider of this kind of users of a network, right? So we use tactically Alto because mainly for two reasons. Alto is a standard for IETF, and Alto also incorporates a nice solution for this, which is the cost calendar feature. So this is standardized. So yeah, we essentially showcase this with Alto. Next, please. So the changes from the previous version, we have aligned the security considerations or requirements as long as the updates in the requirements draft. We also added a new appendix with an assessment of the architecture proposed in the applicability draft that was presented before, and also some, as usual, some editorial changes. I will go now into the detail of the security considerations and the new appendix. So next, please. Regarding security considerations, what is applicable here? So basically the off-path solution prevents some of the security issues because somehow we are not interacting directly with some information in the network. That could be the time synchronization, that could be the routing changes and so. Somehow the off-path may create this isolation between the internals of the network. So it's suitable for being consumed by applications, as said. So we have, let's say, different concerns, so we can isolate one concern from the other. And then particularly to the off-path solution and going to the security considerations, we would need to implement mechanisms for authentication, security data transfer, and privacy preservation as well, especially in the case that we expose information to external applications. Moving to the architectural assessment, so in the applicability draft, there is an architecture being presented where there are three main roles described there: the schedule requester, the schedule consumer, and the schedule responder. So somehow here we did a map of those functions to the particularity of this off-path mechanism. And here just to highlight that differently to what is presented in the applicability draft, there the requester and the consumer are played by the same stakeholder. Here will be clearly different stakeholders. It's worthy to know that what we expect to provide to the application is not the schedule itself, but the implications of the schedule. So what are the topological changes? What are the implications on the KPIs and so that could be a consequence of that schedule. So somehow the roles are here clearly different. And this goes in line a little bit with my comment on the mic before. So adding more use cases would help us to exercise the content of the applicability draft. So this is why probably it's good to have more than one use case. Next, please. So coming to this point, the next steps will be to address further comments, if any. The draft is stable from my perspective. We have presented in use of 5 meetings now, so somehow stable. We are working on an implementation. We are late with that implementation, but we hope that for next IETF will be finished. And the implementation basically implements the scenario that I presented before, but there will be other realizations, let's say, of the concept. And we would like to ask adoption for the working group, for the draft in the working group of this draft as an off-path solution. We do foresee advantages of this off-path solution. We have the offloading of the processing in an dedicated component. Also facilitates the exposure of changes to services and applications, internal and external. Also facilitates the handling of conflicts and a number of other advantages that are described in the document. If adopted, also this could trigger some of the further work in IETF. For instance, there is one of the requirements that is not accomplished by Alto in particular is the idea of having this time overlap in the cost calendar. So that could be some further work that could be triggered once this draft is adopted, but it's somehow orthogonal to that fact. And essentially, just to remark the point, Alto is used here as a opportunistic way of representing the off-path solution. So the focus here is the off-path solution rather than the particularities of Alto, even though Alto will serve the purpose of this off-path solution. And that's all from my side. Thank you.
So I have a few questions. One is just to the first bullet, address further comments. So for those who have proposed in the IETFs to date, updates or comments on the Alto draft, is anyone here, has anyone here read the most recent draft and feels that a comment has not been addressed? Okay. Second question is for those who have read the draft and are tracking through it, does anyone have an objection to the approach that would be taken here for off-path? Okay. Any other comments related to? So again, informal poll, either to chime in online or just to hear quick raise hand. Who here has read the latest version of the Alto draft? So I think that I would like to, my request again is please take some time to read the latest version of that draft. If we are asked, thank you. If we are asked to provide an adoption poll, what I would like to see is one, enough folks in the working group to have read it to make sure that if there are comments, then those comments can be discussed and addressed on the mailing list to make sure that then you would have an opportunity to respond to those comments before we then do an adoption poll. But that is simply a recommendation.
Also, I can try to incentivize as well the comments in the mailing list. So maybe it's on my side as well to take as an action to provoke people on this. Thank you.
Yes, and a little traffic to the mailing list that would say, please read this and post some of those questions too is also a good way to increase that engagement.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, our next presentation is going to be on our schedule Yang model.
Okay, so hello everyone, this is Yingzhen. So I'm gonna present an update of the Yang data model for the scheduled attributes. Next slide, please. So we made some changes since last IETF. The major one is in the device model. Remember during the last presentation, we unpurposely had the device model, the router ID as the dotted quad, and the topology model will have the router ID as URI. And the community's feedback was we want everything to be URI. So that's what we changed also. In the device model, we changed the router ID, also use URI. And we made some editorial changes, basically just to clarify the text. And then hopefully get this model ready for working group last call. And next slide, please. So in this draft, altogether we have 3 modules. The TVR schedule model that has the common definition that can be used, that's being used by the TVR node module, node Yang module, as well as the TVR topology module. So right now our idea is, we have some attributes that's already defined with the time variable attributes, but we want the model later to be can be easily augmented, whatever schedule you want, whatever level of details you want to have, you can, based on your own requirement, choose any of these 3 to do your own augmentations. For the TVR node model, that's the device model that used to manage, like I said, the Mac for the applicable capability draft. So we do have a device model and we have a topology module. That's the service model that meant to be used by a controller. Next slide, please. So this is to show the detail about the TVR schedule model. That's the grouping definition of the schedule. We have a choice that you can use, which is it can be a list of like a period, or it can be a period with recurrence. So based on your requirement, you pick whichever that's the best working for you. And next slide, please. So this one, yeah, I showed the major change. We do it for the node IDs to use the URI. Of course, then that also impacts, for example, the neighbor node ID, all those things. I think at this moment, we as the author, we pretty much think we are we are done with this model. We want the community feedback to let us know what sort of attributes you want to add, whether you think this is sufficient. We leave the augmentation space open, because you don't know a few years down the road, we may have some other attributes. So we make sure the augmentation later will be easy to do. Next slide, please. So yeah, so this one shows the topology YANG module. And you can see it has a very similar structure. We have the node level and link level changes, link level attributes. The major difference is on a device model, you know what is interface space, is you look at your own interface. But in the topology model, the link is identified by the source node. And yeah, and the neighbor. And next slide, please.
I'm sorry, actually, I do have a quick question just to say, for the delay variable, the delay attribute variable, could you remind me what is the unit of measure there? Is that seconds, milliseconds?
I think I don't remember the detail. It might be milliseconds. I have to look at the module. Yeah.
The reason just being is that if we have an understanding of what the magnitude of those delays might be, and we understand the magnitude, then we may.
I have to look at the module to give you an accurate answer. It should not be seconds, but whether it's milliseconds or microseconds, I don't remember. It's a uint32, right? Seconds will be too large. We do have a unit defined.
Okay.
Yeah.
You. Rick?
Rick Taylor, thank you. A follow-on question from where Ed was. I have use cases where I have delays in minutes. And I have a question. My other question was time. Is there a possibility to use something apart from UTC? I know as part of the deep space side meeting that happened, there was a problem with ratifying some of the Mars local time zones into the YANG model because it's based on UTC. Is that, I'm not expecting you to solve it in here, but is it possible to put an extension point in there for that time baseline?
Remember, originally we had different time zone,
Yeah.
and later everybody said we don't want different time zones. We want UTC only.
Yeah.
So that makes everybody's life easier. And I did talk to Mark about this.
Okay.
I don't even know what's the word to describe the Mars time zone, right? So
yeah, and this is a wider problem. Okay, if Mark's here, that's fine. That's fine.
I guess we need to understand that time zone first.
Yeah.
And then see whether we can add something or leave a space for augmentation. Fair? Yeah.
Absolutely.
AC Lindema 11. I didn't join the queue, I know. The units in the YANG model are microseconds. Remember, the reason you didn't remember is because we had a long, protracted discussion of this. And that's what we ended up with. So if that doesn't work, we should discuss on the list what we should do. I don't think we're going to solve it now. Yeah, okay.
But that is something we should take to the mailing list, and perhaps since these are optional attributes, are there short delays and long delays or something like that to help with both use cases?
Yeah, I think we had some discussion before, and then once we pick it, we didn't change it. It stayed there. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay. So I think one thing we can do is to start the Young Doctor review for the module, and then for the requirement document, the relationship between the requirement document and this one. Should the requirement document last call first before this one, right?
So two things. Yes, I think we should request Yang Doctor review. The second is it seems like a good idea to make sure that the requirements are unchanged before we have
Last call this one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this time I did look at the requirement document, make sure all the requirements are covered, but we want that one to last call first, right? In case, there are last call comments during, and the requirement document need to make changes, and we also need to make changes.
Again, we can take that to the working group
Yes.
in case, alternatively, if people think they could go through at the same time. But I agree with
Yeah.
your hat off that is the order they should have.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions, comments?
A couple of comments or questions or the doubts from my side coming from the implementations that we are doing on this. Because basically the scenario that we are assuming is the maintenance of the network. So maybe upgrading the software of a node or changing one card or whatever. So two comments in this respect. The granularity, in the case of the device model, we have the node and the link. Probably would be convenient as well to have a less granularity. I mean, for instance, modeling the card. So because if we need to switch off a card, for instance, there is a schedule for that. We would need to go link by link, and maybe for cards that have 48 ports or 72 ports is too much. So maybe having less granularity in this respect could be beneficial at the time of creating, let's say, the schedule. And the second, but maybe this could be one of the extensions that you mentioned that probably could come in the future, maybe not now, just. And a second comment is in the topology model, the links are unidirectional, are considered to be unidirectional. So if we need to switch off a link, probably this unidirectionality could create some inconsistencies, or I'm not sure at all, but I don't know if we can reconsider or we think about this unidirectionality, if this could create some inconsistency at the time of executing the schedule. That are my comments.
Are you suggesting that we should also support bidirectional link?
Well, I'm to be honest, I'm not sure. Just raising here the point that if maybe we as a working group identify this as a problem or not, just to think about that.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's something we can have a discussion. Yeah.
Actually, comment for Lewis. I missed a couple of your comments, so if you could just take a look at the minutes and update, that would be awesome.
Okay. Okay. If no more questions, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, our last presentation, and before we go into open mic, will be Marc Blanchet talking about his experiences with these Yang modules and the implementation therein.
Please make sure you tell us how the time zone in Mars work.
Yes, also the moon, also anywhere else. Yes.
Yeah, that's the problem. Okay, next slide. So the context is we are working with JPL and we got a data set of Earth to Mars schedules, which includes Earth to every orbiters to rovers, and then orbiters to Earth because the links are different. That's exactly what could be used for TVR in deep space. We took the focus of the orbiter that acts as a relay forwarder, and we implemented the TVR scheduled data model. And that the key here is to be used for Earth to Mars IP network simulations. Next slide. So this is the source data set. I don't want to go too much into this, but roughly you have start date and time for each of the legs of the path. And that data set was from the second quarter of this year. And that during that period of time is between 15 and 17 minutes of one-way light time. And the one-way light time actually changed 1 second per day. You may ask yourself why, but Next slide. Um, the problem is the time reference that we've been facing, because for the TVR to be used and executed locally on the orbiter, it shall to be on local time reference of the spacecraft. There's actually in the space, in the actual database and software of JPL, there's in NASA in general, or space agencies, there's a spacecraft, actually ephemeral or event time. In the data set, there were date time in UTC and sometime in SCED. We had to convert all data in a single time reference, which should be SCED, but there's no provision in TVR data model of that concept. There's no current date time tools library that understand that. And SCED is actually not a static mapping to UTC, because as I just said before, the one-way light time changes over time. Therefore, it's makes your problem more complicated. JPL and space people know how to do this, but we're talking about our protocols to work in this context. Next slide.
Well, real quick, we do have Tony in the queue.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so novice hat on. I'm a little confused. UTC seems like an absolute reference. How can SCED not have a fixed reference to UTC?
Because the one-way light time actually changed. So depending on where the spacecraft is, you need to kind of change, as you go. So
That doesn't follow.
okay.
The time frame of the lander or rover isn't changing because it's moving. I mean, it's not moving at relative speeds.
Is the difference of time with the UTC that changes, right? Because Earth is in a different place.
Well, that is particularly when you get down into the smaller numbers, right? Into the microseconds. I mean, the spacecraft are younger than Earth, and you do have to take that into consideration.
No, sure.
I understand the propagation delay is increasing. That's not the problem.
Mhm.
Okay.
No, it's relativistic effects.
Okay.
For those who are interested in the space side, by the way, there are some excellent publications on how to account for how the ultra-stable oscillators on deep space spacecraft age differently because they are younger than if they were on Earth, and how you have to take that into account over the lifetime of the spacecraft. Sorry.
Next slide.
Next slide.
So the key, well, this is like, just for the fact that, 02 was with the time zones. Next slide. What do you do with this? I could use a local offset, but the resolution is for minutes. I could define a new local time zone SCED, but use it in the data model, but we're kind of going off that way. And all the tools libraries that we have are not aware. So don't do anything. Punt this to someone else, I'm not sure I have a solution for that, but and not a proposal, but I cannot fully model what we're trying to do with the data we have. So next slide. I think that's the last one. Right. So again, I don't have a proposed solution for that, but still in the works.
So if we understand how SCED is related to UTC, why not keep the Yang model in terms of UTC and let the device compensate?
Yeah, that's one of
Yeah.
which one is this? It's like the third one, right? Third bullet or something, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's the right thing to do, but.
I actually agree with Tony's comments. It will take us a lot of effort to understand, if we can understand, how this time zone in Mars work. They should know how to map their
Yeah.
time to
Oh, yeah,
UTC,
completely.
right?
Yep. Yep.
So we can provide some mechanism, maybe just like a adjustment part.
Yeah, that was I was trying to do.
And then
uh,
that they can do the adjustment. We don't know how to do that.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of punt this to someone else, which is you don't care and, but, uh,
Okay.
so,
Dan King. So I was just going to say, I mean, choose Mars or choose the spacecraft because they're two different time zones anyway, right? I mean, depending
Yeah.
on how fast the spacecraft's moving
Yeah.
or the length from the Earth,
yeah,
it's going to
there's
affect the time.
each rover has a different times, quote, quote, time or time zone, time reference, for example, on Mars. So they have their own. Yeah.
But then just to add to that, and it's an excellent point to bring up because it needs to be addressed in some way. If it is being punted, then it should be addressed as we're not addressing it. Perhaps if we give times, there's an understood resolution to that times. And if we've drifted by some number of microseconds, maybe we don't care for scheduling purposes if we're trying to get within second or 100 millisecond synchronization. But it does add to the question of in the schedule itself, should we represent some amount of fidelity of the time associated with that schedule? What is the error bar there?
Yeah, I could add that. So this is very new. I contact the chair saying, I'm working on this and I have the problem. And I was even not sure I have time to finish enough to, present what you do. My own observation was that would be probably the best to have some kind of augmentation in the future. So we're not trying to change something that we don't know exactly what to do. So an augmentation seems to be the right way to do. So that's kind of my current feeling, but which means that we don't need to do this and somewhat fund this to someone else. But
I will then, thank you so much. With chair hat off, the CCSDS, the Consultative Committee for Space Data Systems, which is a different SDO for space, they do have a working group dedicated to time synchronization and how this works at astronomical distances. And so it may be worthwhile taking a look through some of their publications just to see whether or not there's anything we feel is useful for us. Right, we are now at open mic time in the 3 minutes remaining. What I would, while we are thinking through open mic, I wanted to bring back up the chair slides one more time and simply dwell on the current document status. My apologies for not having the link into the Alto work itself, but there are personal drafts here. There are possibly other personal drafts coming in. We are working ourselves to get requirements and schedule into working group last call as we resolve those comments. Any other comments on this body of work or anything that we think is significantly missing other than the notes we've already taken about scoping the applicability document? All right. Well, if you will pardon the pun, it is about time. We will end 2 minutes early. It's good to see everybody, and we will see you at 1:22. Thank you. So that is what it's done. Typically, people will call it mission elapsed time because they just want a big monotonically increasing number of spacecraft because all they care about is coordinating things, not absolute planning things or putting local things. And spacecraft that I have built and been involved with, they will have no concept of UTC. They only deal with mission elapsed time. They stamp their telemetry with mission elapsed time, and then somebody on the ground correlates that to UTC, and then that's how they do all of their reasoning. They wouldn't necessarily push any of that up because what can be simpler than just a large monotonic increasing number?